five-generation San Franciscan, and I was introduced to Cantonese opera with my papa and gongong. And I'm old, but not that old, so it was in the mid-late 60s that Cantonese opera started diminishing with the closure of some of the theaters, and eventually people moving out of Chinatown. And this is John Lau next to me, and I'm going to let John introduce himself.
Hi, I'm John Lau. I am a theater director, and over the past several years I have been looking at how to bring Chinese opera or classical Chinese drama to English-speaking audiences. My background is specifically in the Beijing style and the Kunshan style, so I'm just starting my journey into exploring the Cantonese style.
And then Shirley Ng, so pleased to have you here, and just talk about how you first encountered Cantonese opera, and also introduce yourself a little bit more in addition to the bio that was in our programs.
One more time, my name is Shirley, and I met my Sifu master teacher in 1994, and that is how I started, because before that I know nothing about Cantonese opera. And one day I was in Chinatown, I see this laser disc, maybe it's probably too young to know that. The laser disc has my Sifu's name's label on it, and out of curiosity I bought it, and then I started watching the recording, and what it did, it just super in the artistry of Cantonese opera. So soon after I became a student, and so since then I have been performing Cantonese opera.
Thank you. So John, when did you first encounter any kind of Chinese opera? You said you're more of the Beijing Northern style.
So there are two origin stories to this. My first encounter with classical Chinese drama was with Cantonese opera. I grew up in the East Bay, but my grandmother was here in Chinatown, and she would try to get our family to come back to Chinatown for association lunches at the Tangsen Association. And there was always opera singing there, but my parents are more Lerner and Loewe, Rodgers and Hammerstein people than Cantonese opera, so we were basically there for the fried chicken. And then my parents would say, eat faster, they're gonna start singing soon. So then we would leave, and I wasn't exposed to it. But as a theater artist, I felt like, well, this is my heritage, shouldn't I know more about Chinese opera? And it took a while, but because there's so much more documentation in English on the Beijing style, and then more recently in the Kunshan style, I was able to access those forms. And then in 2006, Bai Xianyong brought his production of Peony Pavilion to the Bay Area. I was able to audit a class, and I'd studied a little bit of Mandarin at that point. So when I saw this show, there was a moment where the heroine, Du Linyang, is dying of love sickness. And she says to her maid, 春香这里来. And I didn't need the subtitles to understand that. And then she said it 2 more times, so I felt like I was really on top of things. And that moment when she's dying of love sickness, and she's covered in makeup, and her maid has a jeweled headdress, and everybody's speaking in these really piercing voices, it's not naturalistic. But in that moment, those 2 actors on a bare stage, well, okay, they had a chair, but the scenery was not realistic. It's not what we're used to as Western audiences. But those performers held everybody in that theater in the palm of their hands. The 2,000 people were completely silent. And I thought, as an artist, I want that power. I want to figure out what's going on here, that they can go against all of our instincts and still hold the audience.
So I was going to say there's a lot of history for me because my Gongong Papa actually were friends with Lei Huichun, also known as the father of Bruce Lee. So Bruce Lee's father was from Fatsan, and we're Sunda ancestry. My Gongong was born here, but he went to China to finish his education and married my Papa before he came back here. And my Papa, whole nother story, she was on Angel Island for 6 months before she was able to join him. But along that way, they still continued the history. I remember at my grandparents' Nob Hill home, they were able to buy a set of flats in 1937 before Chinese could actually really leave Chinatown. But my Gongong was a furrier, so I guess that helped that he had clientele outside the skirts of Chinatown. So, and then we also know Mei Li Tom, who's the highest woman who was in the state legislature. Her father was Wang, Wen Fei, and then her pal Mason Wang, his dad was Wang Chumo. They were raised by a Basque woman in the Richmond because, as you can imagine, Cantonese opera stars didn't make really good parents. They would perform and then go have siuye, the late night snack after the performances, and they wouldn't go home to bed till about 4 in the morning, and that meant that they couldn't get their kids off to school. The interesting thing about Mei Li Tom's mother, there used to be a building right across from Chinese Hospital where the Cantonese opera troops would stay, and so when it was time for Bruce Lee's mother to give birth, Mei Li Tom's parents were staying in that same building, and so Mei Li Tom's mother walked Bruce Lee's mother across the alleyway to give birth at Chinese Hospital. Now you know the rest of the story. So why are each of you so committed to preserving and expanding the knowledge of Cantonese opera? Shirley.
I feel like Cantonese opera is a special art, and I really feel like that this has to be preserved. I actually wrote a book. This is published in 2023. This is about the Cantonese opera development for the last century in San Francisco.
And could we have the slides of Shirley's book and the QR code?
And in here, I have about 400 historical images, just to, you don't even have to understand Chinese, but just looking at the photos will be very precious, important. Julie just talked about Bruce Lee and his father. I actually have a stage photo of Bruce Lee's father performing at that time in this book. I feel like it's important for me to preserve this piece of history because Cantonese opera is also part of the immigrant to American stories. I myself, being an immigrant myself, but I work all my working life in the mainstream America. So I feel like, I'm also a practitioner of Cantonese opera. So I feel like I am in a very unique position to serve as a bridge between these two worlds. So I feel like I have a strong responsibility to record this important history for the future generations. So because to the best of my knowledge, no other books have yet published on this topic. And that's why I wrote this book, and I hope this art will stay for a long time.
Thank you for your great work, Shirley. And then I got a 5-minute warning a minute ago from Esther. So John, why do you want to expand opera from like the northern style that you had studied previously and now are venturing into Cantonese opera?
So Cantonese opera it should be closer to my heart because that's my family's heritage. It was just easier to study from an English speaker's point of view, the northern styles. It's sort of like how I speak more Mandarin than I speak Cantonese because my mother cannot correct my tones. My tones are still wrong in Mandarin, but my mom doesn't speak Mandarin, so she can't correct me.
Yeah. My dad spoke 5 different dialects and I can barely master Cantonese. But I still speak it. The lucky thing is my papa didn't speak that much English, so it made it a little bit easier. And if you like to eat, as kids do, Larry remembers, you go to Cantonese opera and you snuggle up to your grandparents and it was the snacks. And I have to tell you, my grandmother just always looked very regal and she didn't like to drop the peanut shells or the candy wrappers. So you open her purse and you find peanut shells and candy wrappers. But on the outside, she looked very elegant. So I wanted to just talk a little bit, you mentioned about history, and so what can we do, you think, to get the younger generation more interested? And I know with our English subtitles, we can expand beyond just the Cantonese speaking population. So John, what do you think you can do to help?
I think we need to make room for experimentation. And what I mean by that is not just these bilingual presentations, but I'm interested in telling Chinese stories in a Chinese aesthetic with movement and some of the music, but also in English, because that's really my heritage. My parents only spoke Cantonese at home and they didn't want my sister and me to understand, so English is my native language, but I'm an inheritor of these stories and this culture, even if it's a little slightly removed. So I want to find a way to bring this culture to a wider audience, to an American audience where my home is, in a way that they don't have to study so much, to study like all of the stories of Three Kingdoms or Water Margin, or to understand the intricacies of the movement, and the instrumentation is different, and the key, the musical modes are different. So many differences. What can we do that's in between? Not necessarily to replace what traditional art brings us, but to be a hybridization or something in between, a stepping stone.
So Shirley, do you feel proud that you've really influenced, especially someone like me and John, ABCs, and I say Deutsch, and still really love Cantonese opera?
I do. For me, Cantonese opera is almost like a religion to me. So I always tell myself if I can just influence just one person, I will be very happy. So.
And on a final note, because this is, as Cheyenne Chen mentioned, this is Women's History Month, some of my favorite were when the girls, the daughters of these powerful men who've been defeated, dressed up as the warriors and actually fought. So you think about Fa Molan. So those are things that influenced me the most. And then hopefully at the next event, you'll see the man with wings, and that's the scholar. And I told my mom that I wanted one of those hats, and she said, well, those are for scholars. And I said, well, I want one of those if I study really hard. And she said it was only for men, but being like a feminist, I really still want those hats. So thank you all for being here. There's any final questions, comments from the audience? Yes.
Yes. Thank you for putting on this show. This is very interesting and inspiring. My question is, you talk about the history of Chinese opera, Cantonese opera, but it brings me to think about the early Chinese immigrants in the Gold Mountains, like you mentioned. The Chinese opera troops come to the Gold Mountain and they perform for those miners, the river workers. Would you guys think about replicating some of those simple early acts that they have done for the early pioneers?
My answer is very difficult because there's no history that's left. In the big fire in San Francisco in 1906 and the big earthquake, they destroyed almost everything. They destroyed everything. And then even in China and Hong Kong, they don't have any record. At that time, they don't keep any record of it. And also at that time, the opera is just very simple. Just like the costume is not as exquisite as what we have now, and the singing, the instrument, maybe just 4 or 5 pieces of musical instruments. So, and then again, the scripts are very simple. So it's just very difficult to replicate what they have done.
Well,
Understand. Thank you.
Yes, and we may have Lauren Yee, Larry's very talented daughter, actually come up with some kind of production in the future. And then Bayard.
Yeah, hi. I have a question. When I was a kid, about 7 or 8, at 3 o'clock on Saturdays, we would be in my grandpa's laundromat helping to fold clothes and get all that business done on Saturday, the busiest day. The Chinese music would go on, and it would be this Chinese opera type music. And it wasn't that I loved it, but it reminds me of the time, spending time with my grandparents and my aunts and uncles and helping, get the laundry done for the business. And At the same time, when we went to the Family Association banquets, after the banquet, we could go to the club and they'd be playing music and there'd be these singers and all this good food that we could get in sweets, and then the red paper packages with money in it. And so we just sit there listening to all these singing, but we were waiting to get candies as well as the red packages. So it's just some
Yeah.
nice history lesson.
I think for many of us, it's very comforting because we remember our grandparents, our parents, and my father in his retirement. My father was the immigrant, but via Taiwan Chinese Naval Academy. So he actually performed with Pig Hong Do and Batwa as an amateur. And so it really brings us back to our family and really our roots. So, and my cousins still love it. I mean, we're 4th and 5th generation, and we still love Cantonese opera. And my gongo used to play Cantonese opera on those big 8-track decks every single night. So if we were over there, we would hear
I
it.
think we have a question here.
Oh, one more question. Yeah, this will be the last question.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a quick question to John's point about, the future of Cantonese opera and experimentation. I think we've seen a little bit of that experimentation you've been talking about, how like in Hong Kong, I've seen they've been bringing more modern stories versus focusing just on the historical. Like one of the very controversial ones that they had in Hong Kong was one where they had President Trump and President Zelensky fighting or something like that. And so I was curious to know, do you have any perspectives or thoughts about bringing kind of modern stories, modern context into Cantonese opera?
Yes, I think we do. Those kinds of contemporary issues are a continuation of the tradition that we've mentioned about traveling troops in the gold rush or railroad eras, adapting contemporary stories or just bringing gossip, because there are also people who talk to the audience. But the idea of Trump and Zelensky in this art form is a continuation of that that adaptability that Cantonese opera has that the Beijing and the Kunshan style do not. So the introduction of Western instruments like a saxophone to bring a different timbre to the music is also specific to Cantonese. The northern stuff, whether it's because it's closer to the capital or because the Kunshan style is officially the oldest form and therefore we must revere it. So it has to be very conservative and just conservative in its outlook. It's not so flexible the way Cantonese opera is. I'm not sure if that was a complete sentence, but I hope it answered your question.
All right, thank you.
So thank you so much. I want to make sure that people capture the QR code. We do rely on donations, and it's really important to keep this going on. And if people want to take photos,
So can everyone go sit in so what we'll do is the photographer will take everyone, all the behind the scene musicians, performer will come here so we can take a big photo. If it's okay with you with photos, so we ask everyone to move to the middle so we